What's going on, everybody? You're now watching Hellsheart Merch and Movies. I'm your host, Jay Curtis Strickland, and joining me is my soon-to-be co-host, Mr. John Carter. What's going on, my friend?
What's up? It's good to be here, man. Good to see you.
Absolutely. So the whole premise of this channel, and initially I started doing live streaming of video games, which I'm sure was kind of kind of threw people for a loop a little bit, because you know, merch and movies, like, but I wanted to do something with gaming on Twitch and stuff, and that was just like the easiest, most successful thing. And I've always wanted to do this with somebody else because it would just make for better discussions. And we're going to do a bunch of other series. Our first series is going to be called "Why Did You Make Me Watch This?" and it's going to be specializing in um, B movies and stuff that's kind of off the beaten path. And we're going to do kind of a breakdown and analysis of those movies. Our first movie is going to be Deep Space, directed by Fred Olin Ray. It's starring Charles Napier, Ann Turkel, Bo Svensson, also Julie Newmar, which I thought was pretty interesting. Original Catwoman, and she looks really good in that movie. But this is kind of serving as our pilot episode, and we're going to kind of like introduce ourselves and like our relation with movies and like what we watched growing up. If you watch the Teen F podcast, which you should subscribe to, by the way, sometimes I will break down like movies and entertainment with my guests if they're so inclined. That used to be a huge like staple in like hardcore and punk rock, but not many people are really talking about it anymore, which is kind of unfortunate, because it used to be that, bands would play like movie samples in their recordings and stuff. And you don't really see too much of that anymore. I don't know if it's for copyright reasons or whatever, but so yeah. John actually came on my show on TNF probably about a year ago, I think, something like that. And we've been talking about doing like a movie channel for a while. So what I wanted to do was ask him about, kind of like his relationship with movies, like what he watched growing up. So I'll leave it to you there, John.
Well, so what? It's kind of interesting. Like when we started talking about this over the course of the probably since last January, out of the blue, I got big into collecting VHS again, and I think one of the reasons why was over the years, just kind of you collect things. You grow up, you just have those things that you're holding on to, and I moved back to Iowa. I don't know, about 3.5 years ago, and going through boxes, I found some movies, and it reminded me of like how I got into like so many different genres. I mean, I grew up watching Bruce Lee, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Steven Seagal, Chuck Norris. My mom and dad are probably the two people I have to thank the most for kind of like I guess designing my taste buds for movies. Like my dad is a Vietnam vet that would love to watch these movies, these military movies, and point out all the inaccuracies. Be like, oh, if he was really firing that gun, he'd be shooting across, across the field, or like, that guy's stripes are incorrect and stuff like that. So I was just like, I would sit there and we watch like these Steven Seagal movies, or watch like, Invasion USA with Chuck Norris, or like, just any. I guess you'd call it like military exploitation films of the 80s, and
Sure.
those were great. I didn't choose to watch them. That's just when we go to the video store, my parents would pick something out, and my dad would always pick something like that. I think it was because he wanted to flex and show that he knew his shit, about like,
He knew. Yeah.
yeah. And but he also enjoyed it. But also too, I was always kind of sitting thinking, man, with him being a Vietnam vet, I couldn't watch some of these movies. I just think you
Right.
kind of trigger some kind of like some flashback.
Yeah.
But like, so we go to the video store. My dad would pick out an action movie, and me and my sisters would pick out like a comedy of the time. It was usually something, like License to Drive, with Corey Feldman and Corey Haim. That was a big rewatcher for us. Pee-wee's Big Adventure. When the Ernest movies came out, Ernest was big in our
Love the
household.
Ernest movies.
Dude, honestly, I would probably say mainstream 80s trash was kind of the thing. And we had Cinemax and HBO and Showtime.
Wow.
So of course, after certain times at night, certain types of movies would come on. Like you'd have like your soft core British thing going on. It
Mhm.
wasn't Benny Hill. There was these Benny Hill knockoffs that would be kind of like this. I just remember this. There's this one movie or this one series that was on. I was on either Cinemax or HBO, like after 11 o'clock on Friday or Saturday nights. And this guy was kind of like a blonde haired Austin Powers kind of dude that was always in the situation where he was found with like naked women in bed, and like it was just with this goofy music and stuff. And there was I think that like the directors of Austin Powers, whatever these were, they got all their ideas from that. But anyway, stuff like that would come on, and of course you got like what was the famous oh man, it was like this, it was a soft core movie where this lady she would always be in a different scenario. She'd be like in Paris. She'd be in the
Emmanuel.
Manual. Fuck yeah, dude. Okay, do you remember the
Yes. Remember those.
episode of Seinfeld where they kind of did like an Emmanuel thing where they're like the something about like they said the name of the movie. It was like it's about a hot affair from Milan to Minsk or whatever. Do you remember
Yes.
that? Oh,
Yeah.
dude. So it was shit like that, right? So it ran the gamut from like my parents would, I think they wouldn't like out now allow us to watch stuff like that, but they wanted to watch it. And since we were still up, we'd watch our movie, and then like my parents were just kind of like they weren't ready to go to bed, and we're watching Cinemax and Showtime, HBO. So what comes on next? Oh, some softcore. Like, oh, this looks like a legitimate movie. It's like this guy's a scientist, and and she and she's this rich lady, and like, oh, that happened, and then of course you get the parents going like, oh well, hey, go put the dog out, like somebody would kind of like clear their throat, and during the sex scene or whatever. And so it was just kind of like just having this wide open like unintentional exposure to pop culture, bad and good, at a young age, sort of kind of like allowed me to kind of like get into stuff like pro wrestling, and and heavy metal, and punk rock, like in the late 80s, early 90s, because to me it's all intertwined. Because a lot of these movies that I would watch in the 80s and 90s, you'd have like you had like Trick or Treat, one of my favorite movies, not Trick or Treat, but Trick or Treat, with Skippy from fucking Family Ties, Gene Simmons and
Yep.
Ozzy Osbourne,
Mhm.
stuff like that, what I mean? So like getting back to your question, my relationship with movies was kind of like a combination of trips to the video store with my parents, and having access to Cinemax, HBO, and Showtime. And on Friday and Saturday nights, my parents would allow us to put sleeping bags in the living room and stay up and watch TV and stay up all night if we wanted to, and
Nice.
then because we weren't a church going family, so we didn't have to worry about getting up early on Sunday. So it was just so, but they were strict and stern about a lot of things, and they looked out for us. They didn't let us cuss in public or whatever. But like when it came to like pop culture, my mom was really big into pop culture, so she took us to see Footloose and Flashdance, and I saw Revenge of the Nerds in a fucking drive-in theater when I was a kid. I saw Porky's
Nice.
at a fucking theater. You know what I mean? So it was
Wow.
kind of like it's almost like my parents were like, you know what? They're going to eventually see this, but
Right.
we can have parental discretion and say, hey, look, here's the thing: if you're uncomfortable, or I'm gonna let you know this is gonna be one of these movies where there's gonna be a lot of cussing, or there might be some nudity or whatever. I really don't want you to watch it, and when something's I'm gonna pause it. I'm gonna have you leave the room. They tried. 80s parents,
Sure.
the chain smoking 80s parents, that
Yep.
raised you on Sunny D and McDonald's. You know what I mean? Like they did what
Yep.
they could. So, but yeah,
Yeah.
video stores and basic cable pretty much is kind of where it started.
Nice. Yeah, I kind of have somewhat of a similar relationship in that, movies were always kind of omnipresent in my life. I had pretty open minded parents when it came to things that they allowed me to watch. There were definitely things that I was not allowed to watch. I was Terminator 2 was one of those because I remember when it came out, everybody at school was talking about it, and I hadn't even seen the first Terminator at that point, and I wanted to see it just because I remember the trailer for it, and I was like, "Oh my god, this looks amazing," and but my mom would not allow us to watch it. Eventually, though, my dad rented it for us, and we watched it anyway. And so, my dad was always kind of like that. If my mom didn't allow something, he'd be like, "Shh, don't tell your mom," But I definitely got like a different kind of exposure to films in that, my mom, when she was younger, she did little films on like Super 8, and it was for like a high school project or something. But I actually watched them like later in life. I was like, this is really good. Like, why didn't you pursue this like further? And she did photography, and my sister became a photographer, and like, she always said that my mom inspired her to do that, and so that was kind of cool. But I got to watch like foreign films. Like I distinctly remember watching The Red Balloon, the French film, when I was a kid. And I always got to watch just kind of um probably more mature movies, not necessarily bad movies, like with adult themes, but like stuff that a kid of my age probably wouldn't be watching. Now my dad, on the other hand, my dad, he always exposed me to the good stuff. Like, he was like, "Oh, you should watch Bad Lieutenant," and I'm like, "Oh, Bad Lieutenant." And it's like, there's a scene with Harvey Keitel like jerking off in front of some young girls, and I was like, "What the fuck is this?" And but I remember growing up, because I also lived in the Midwest. I lived in Montana for about 7 years, and that was kind of like real formative for me. I lived there from like 1990 to 1997, and we did not have cable in my house, so all we got were, and I don't know if I think we had access to uh satellite, but it was just not something my dad never invested in, and which was fine, because it was like I got to go over to all my friends' houses and like watch all the the bad shit. Like, I had a friend named Bill Cole, and he had like two older brothers, and he would always be showing me, like, he showed me, I remember I Come in Peace with Dolph Lundgren when I was younger. And he would show me all this like out of the way, like obscure, like B movie type shit. So I definitely got a lot from him. But back to what I was saying about not having cable, like I always got to watch like censored versions, like stuff with like cuss words bleeped out, and just whatever movie was on for the week. Now we went to the movie store. It was a movie store called Hastings. They don't exist anymore, but that was where it was at. And when I lived in Great Falls, anytime we took a trip to Hastings, it was like, oh wow, what are we going to rent this time? And kids nowadays will never know that experience, because when you rented a movie back in the day, you would commit to watching it, because it wasn't just like streaming where you had every movie at your command, and if you don't like it within 5 minutes, you can just shut it off,
Yeah.
and so it really made you relish the whole movie going experience. um I Like I said, I definitely really kind of like found my groove like in the early 90s. The typical movies that your average adolescent male would watch, like Terminator, Sylvester Stallone, and Schwarzenegger was God to me back then. I mean, he still is. Like, his older catalog of stuff, like, those movies have immense rewatchability. I just watched original Terminator probably about 2 weeks ago, and that movie is a fucking masterpiece. It is such a masterclass in storytelling. It's a very tight script. It's a very simple script. Like, it pisses me off that they've even tried to extend the franchise beyond the second one, because the movies just got so hammy and convoluted, and it's just like, I don't believe this, and you guys are just doing a lot of this stuff for fan service and for the sake of you know just pleasing the audience with nostalgia. And it always really just kind of never sat well with me. And I begrudgingly went and saw Terminator Dark Fate with one of my buddies, because it was his birthday and everybody was fucked up and we were all just having a good time. I think that was probably the rudest I've ever been at a movie theater. Movie theaters are like sacred grounds for me. It's almost like going to church, and it pisses me off when people talk in the movies. But we were just carrying on, and like we were just like, this movie's a piece of shit, and like
Yeah.
I felt bad for people that legitimately went there and paid for it. But movies are also kind of in my blood, in that, rewind a little bit, like, my grandfather and my grandmother met each other when they were working at a movie theater. It was the Palace Theater in Syracuse, New York, and my grandfather was the manager, and my grandmother was just one of the employees there. I don't know what specifically she did there, but and I always asked her, I said, so she said they went on a double date with somebody, and I said, "What did you think of what did you," and my grandfather's name is John Mayer, by the way, which was kind of cool. But like, I said, "What did you think of him?" You know, and she goes, "Oh, he was a jerk like that." And I always found that to be funny. That that's kind of how their relationship started. And interestingly enough, a few days after my grandmother passed away, the Palace Theater in Syracuse followed me on Instagram. And I was like,
Weird.
"Whoa." I was like, "Wow, that's crazy," And I mean, I don't think anything is coincidence. I think that everything is kind of divinely and universally manifested. And granted, I followed a lot of like movie theaters and actors at the time, so it's highly possible that they could have just um they could have just followed me out of the blue. But I always took that as like a sign of, hey, my grandmother's like watching over me somewhere, and my grandfather, like I always thought that was kind of cool. But so like I guess a good question would be like, what like early going like theater experiences, like what's the first time you remember just being like blown away by a movie?
Well, I'm old enough to where drive-in movies were a thing.
Mhm.
And I remember seeing whew, I don't know what run, you know how like in the 70s when a movie was, you probably read about this. When a movie was so huge, they would rerun it. Like Star Wars was in fucking theaters for fucking ever. You know?
Forever. Yeah.
Yeah. And I saw Star Wars in at a drive-in, and then I saw it in a proper theater. And then I saw Empire Strikes Back in a theater, and then I saw Jedi in a theater. So I saw all three of those in theater. And to be honest with you, like seeing those, I mean, I would watch movies at home, or whatever. But like at a very young age, I remember Star Wars, American Graffiti, uh, the first um, uh, the first Indiana Jones movie, and DC Cab. Do you know the movie
Not
DC
familiar
Cab?
with that. No. No, no, no.
DC Cab was a I've actually got it on VHS over there, but it's
Nice.
it's 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 a comedy where with Mr. T. And are you familiar? Yeah, are you familiar with the movie Car Wash from the 70s?
Car
Um,
Wash, yeah.
yeah, Richard Pryor played like this pimp king, and it's a pretty awesome movie. But anyway, I always thought DC Cab was kind of like the cabbie version of, because Car Wash takes place with these really cool characters, and it gets into their lives in a at a car wash. But like DC Cab is kind of the same thing, but like it's a predominantly African American cast, just like Car Wash was, and it had really cool music, like R&B and funk and stuff like that, and it showcased certain songs. But anyway, I just remember like aside from DC Cab, like the George Lucas stuff, you know what I mean? That was
Yeah.
that was seeing that stuff in the theaters, and then like I remember seeing like Porky's and Christine, and like we for
Ooh,
some I saw Conan the Barbarian, dude, like the most
nice.
brutal or biggest, most like brain exploding movies you could ever see at a young age in theaters, and so shortly thereafter, stuff like Cinemax and HBO, where you could watch all these kind of movies, and then the video store, blah blah blah. But I think when I was younger, it was like, oh fuck, we're going to this movie. I didn't say that because I was a little kid, but we're like, this is what we're doing tonight. This is we're going, we're going to go to the drive-in. We're gonna go to the concession stand. Me and my sisters and my mom and dad. We're gonna walk to the concession stand, get our stuff, go back to the car. They're gonna take the little speaker that you tune the radio
Yep.
in your car
Mhm.
to that FM station. You put it on the side. It sounded like fucking garbage, dude. It was like this little
Yeah.
stupid fucking like iron fucking speaker that they would put there. And then I remember as time went by, you wouldn't have the speaker anymore. You tune it to your radio in your car. I don't
Oh,
know if,
wow.
I don't know if they were ever happening simultaneously, but I know that drive-in movies had that option. You had like the speaker. So I remember being at like flea markets over the years and go, oh shit, somebody's selling one of those drive-in movie speakers, and I kind of regret never buying one of them. But yeah, just it was whenever like a big mind-blowing, game-changing movie would come out, just by chance, my parents or like me and my cousins or whatever, we'd go see him. And I'm happy that I grew up in the early 80s to like the to well shit early 80s to early 90s, some of the most monumentally big movies of the blockbuster era, the VHS era, just when there was maybe 5 movies that came out. You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
seemed back in the day you'd see trailers and like you watching Dukes of Hazzards or the Cosby Show or Roseanne or whatever was on in any era of your life, and you'd see movie trailers, movie commercials, and you would see the same 3 to 5 movie, and it was like, those are the fucking movies you're gonna go watch. Those are the
Pretty
movies that
much. Yeah.
matter. And
Yep.
then of course as time went by, more and more movies, and then as you get older and you start to go to video stores and go, oh, this went straight to video. And then I actually went through a phase where I'm like, dude, I didn't watch anything that didn't go straight to video. You know what I mean? Like some of the best,
Wow.
you know what I mean? Like there was like some really cool underground comedies, you know what I mean? And like action movies, like especially I like martial arts movies and stuff like that. So a lot of that stuff was like, I mean, it might have went in the theaters in its native countries, but like a lot of stuff was straight to video, and like Trauma, Corman movies and stuff like that, where it's just kind of like and then of course to me the turning point was Mystery Science Theater 3000 when that started on the Ha channel, which was pre
Sci-fi.
Comedy. Yeah,
Oh, Comedy Central. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. And so it was just kind of like, I was inundated with these movies that you would go see in the theaters. I'd go see all the all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. I went and saw Commando. That was a big one that stuck out for me. Rambo, movies like that. And then movies like License to Drive with the Coreys, and like and I went and saw Lost Boys and stuff like that. So, but just I mean, honestly, like these movies that just defined an era or defined pop culture, each time. And what really got me, in hindsight, blows my mind is like you'd see these movies and they'd be referring to something in current pop culture. And you're like, and then you do a little bit of research or you watch the thing, you're like, oh, this movie was filmed. It took them 4 years to film this. How are they referring to something like right now? The one thing that sticks out in my head so much is in Commando when Schwarzenegger's sitting down with Alyssa Milano and he's just like, boy George, but like girl George or whatever, you know what I mean? And I remember being a kid and I loved Boy George when I was a little kid, it was pop music when you're a kid. And I'm sitting there going, oh dude, Arnold Schwarzenegger's, clowning on Boy George. Oh, and that, and that's fucking Alyssa Milano from Who's the Boss. And so all these current pop cultural things going on at once. And then you've got Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was like the biggest motherfucker, in that whole genre. Boom, boom, boom. It's like you go and watch these movies and you would just go like, okay, now I'm going to see in this 90 minutes, this is who I am now. This is when I walk out of this theater, I want to shoot a bunch of bad guys. I want to go to a fucking mall, and fuck shit up. You know what I mean? And just like with Karate Kid, dude, I don't know anybody that didn't see Karate Kid in the theater that didn't go home and try to fucking like roundhouse kick his little sister. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Dude, all my friends. Oh, this is going to sound so fucking terrible, but I got to say it because it's fucking funny too.
Okay. Go for it.
I grew up in a town that had there's a lot of Laotian, Vietnamese, and Chinese kids, and the probably the cringiest thing ever is when Karate Kid came out. Kids would go up to white kids would go up to these Asian kids in school and ask them to teach them karate. Because that was that's how big it was. And I grew up in Iowa, a small town in Iowa, Denison, Iowa. And we would go to the movies, at the Denison Theater, or we'd go Carroll, Iowa, which was 30 minutes away. We'd go watch movies there, or we'd go into the big city of Sioux City, which was like an hour and a half away where I live now. But it's like you out on the playground, you were talking about pop culture. Ghostbusters. Yep. We pretended we were Ghostbusters, It's like everybody wanted to fucking be Bill Murray's character because he was the coolest one, and then, stuff like that, and it's just like, but when you went to the movie theater, when you know, at least, you know, I can't say that it's not the, because I mean, I'm sure there's a young kid nowadays that's going and seeing Marvel movies, going and seeing, you know, really awesome, what's his name, the guy that did Nope and all that, Jordan Peele.
Jordan Peele. Yeah.
Yeah, his movies are phenomenal. Like, you know, like kids going to see those movies, like just imagine how like the Marvel universe, Jordan Peele, M. Night Shyamalan, you know, like, and then all these remakes of movies you and I grew up with, how they are affecting young kids now and how they're influencing them now. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
will never discount any current generation because this is their shit. You know, even though they've got
Right.
streaming, you know, I don't know if going to the movie theater is an event for a kid in middle school anymore, like it was for me. But I
Right.
mean, like that's you. Movies shape who you are as an adolescent. You know,
I
as a
agree.
kid, you know, you're going through puberty, and it's like, oh man, I want to have a cool one liner at lunch. You know, so you know what I mean. So you're gonna quote, you know, Revenge of the Nerds. You're gonna quote, you know, something. I mean, one of the most overly quoted fucking things I remember when it came out, like in Ghostbusters, when they're like at some press conference or whatever, and somebody turns to Bill Murray. This guy was like, he's saying like he's you know he's dangerous, blah blah blah, whatever, and they're like, you know, and goes, you can listen to this dickless motherfucker, and he's like, no, just shut up, blah 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 blah. And he goes, is that true? He goes, yes, sir, it is true. This man has no dick, right?
Oh, it's
I
the greatest line.
I totally butchered that. I know I did, but dude, me and my friends, we would quote that, dude. And then like, and
Yeah.
then what was it? Do you remember Bachelor Party with Tom
Tom
Hanks?
Hanks. I
Yeah,
don't remember it because I haven't seen it in forever, but I definitely
same.
know the film. Yeah.
I think I maybe only watched about 10 minutes of that, but the way that me and my friends quoted that movie, I would quote it because they'd quote it. I would learn the quotes from them. And I remember there was a stripper named Nick the Dick, you know, and then like whenever there'd be somebody in school that like, oh, this is a new kid, his name is Nick, like, oh, Nick the Dick, you know. So all of our jokes were from these terrible movies we weren't supposed actually shouldn't have been watching, you know, when we were like in elementary school, you know.
Right. Right.
But you know, that's just kind of like, you know, I mean, not to spin off on a tangent, but I think that that stuff is really, really important to you because, you know, when your brain is being developed and you're absorbing information, you know, the sights and sounds and the music, you know what I mean? Like, I mean, I gravitated towards movies that were kind of like, you know, that featured like, you know, hard rock, you know, like if it was like, you know, there's like a, you know, like Trick or Treat, for example, you know, and then like, you know, just you know, and then even like Return of the Living Dead, you know, it had a really cool soundtrack with like 45 Grave and the Flesh Eaters and really cool punk rock stuff in there, you know, and there's just so, you know, I liked, you know, I watched Headbangers Ball when I was younger, when that was on, you know, on MTV and stuff like that. So I gravitated towards, you know, hair metal and punk rock simultaneously in the 80s, you know. And then to me, I saw a lot of like the same sort of aesthetic and imagery and attitudes in a lot of my favorite movies growing up in the 80s as well. You know,
Yeah.
you'd be like that. My favorite is the action movie where like Steven Seagal or Charles Bronson or Chuck Norris or somebody would go up against a group of street toughs, and it would be the most culturally diverse and like socially diverse and racially diverse street gang. You'd have the black guy with the mohawk, the Chinese guy with the Indian headdress for some reason. You know what I mean? The
Yeah.
you know the short girl with like the, you know, with the crew cut with the pink stripe right here. You know what I mean? You know, and
Right.
it was, but then you grow up, you start listening to music, and you're like, oh, dude, you know, the street gang in what was it I was watching? Oh, in Van Damme Lionheart looks like an all black version of the Plasmatics, you know, or like, you know, you know, or like any of the street toughs in like Escape from New York, they look like the Village People, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or just
100%.
like random punk rock bands, you know. But just, you know, I was very visual, you know, the visual
Yeah.
aesthetic and like the, you know, the soundtracks and stuff like that, you know, because I've had ADD for years, and I have to watch a movie 100 fucking times to really grasp it. When there's one movie that had my attention the whole time, I mean, those were the ones that you never forget.
Yeah, definitely. And I can relate to a lot of that. I mean, you're not much older than me, but I think as far as what existed in our worlds at the time, as far as cinematically, were very similar. I was huge on Ghostbusters when I was a kid. We actually had a Commodore 64 computer. Do you remember those?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Oh
we
yeah.
had a Commodore 64 computer, and we had a Ghostbusters game on there, and I fucking played the shit out of that game. I loved that game. And around the time the Ghostbusters animated series was going on, the real Ghostbusters, and I was super into that. I had no idea that there was a movie. I remember my parents told me one day, they said, you know, there's a Ghostbusters movie, right? And like my fucking 5 year old, 6 year old brain was like, what? You know, like that. And so I remember very distinctly they rented the tape, and you know, I saw that you just purchased a copy of it from the flea market, but it was just an all black tape with just the Ghostbusters logo on it, and they rented it from the video store. They brought it back, and I was like, holy shit, this is amazing. But then I was watching it, I was like, this is nothing like the cartoon. I was like, this is like, everybody looks different, like they're smoking cigarettes, like they're getting blowjobs. Like, I mean, I didn't know what a blowjob was.
Oh
I
yeah.
remember watching that scene with the ghost giving Dan Aykroyd a blowjob, and I was like, "What's going on here? This is weird. What's happening?" And my parents were like, don't look, don't look away," you know. And
Yeah.
but I was so into Ghostbusters, I had all the toys and everything, and I remember I was at a theater, and I can't remember what I was watching. I think it was like The Land Before Time or something like that, or some kids movie. I don't think I saw too many adult movies in the theaters when I was younger, but um, I do remember that my first movie ever in the theaters was Mickey's Christmas Carol, you know, a Disney movie about Charles Dickens' Christmas Carol. And then I remember, I think we were leaving Land Before Time, or was it Land Before Time or All Dogs Go to Heaven? One of those two. And there was a big, and I have the picture of this still, I'll have to find it, but like there was a big cardboard cutout of Ghostbusters 2. And I
Mm.
remember walking out of the theater and seeing it and like, holy shit, they made another Ghostbusters, you know? And so we definitely saw that one in the theaters. And in hindsight, because I rewatched it again a few years ago, it's a clone of the first movie, but just more family friendly and like more kind of geared towards people that were fans of the cartoon. Because
Huh.
Even like Janine, Annie Potts, she looked like way different. Like she looked more akin to her character in the cartoon, you know. And but you know, I remember some of my favorite times ever were just hanging out with my friends, having sleepovers, and just watching. I mean, we watched the fucking like, you know, just the goriest fucking like Aliens was a one that was pretty like on regular rotation in my house with my friends. And you know, we watched the first Predator, we liked the first Predator, but I found myself watching the second Predator more often. And I really like the second Predator still to this day. I think it's fucking incredible. What you were saying about kind of the movies like quoting lines and stuff like that. Wayne's World came out when I was like in third grade. And I remember we were all singing Bohemian Rhapsody and we were quoting all the lines from the movie. Do you remember? Yeah, surely you remember like Dare, right?
Dare? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Dare, yeah.
The drug abuse, resistance,
Resistance
education.
education. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So we had 2 dare officers at our school, and I remember this very distinctly. I can't remember what his name is, but he was a Latin guy. And he would come and like eat with the kids and stuff like that. And Wayne's World had just come out. Now I'm sure you remember the scene where they're outside the donut store and the cops out there and they go, "Hey, do you smell bacon? I smell bacon." And he's like, "Yeah,
Oh
I
shit.
definitely smell a pork product of some kind." All the kids went up and said that shit to him, and we didn't realize like how fucking offensive it was. And I remember my teacher caught wind of it and was like, all right, so who did it, like that? Nobody raised their hand. She was like, well, we're going to sit here until somebody fesses up to it. And I was like, oh fuck, you know. And like me and one other kid raised our hands, and we had to go to him and apologize. And it was the most like embarrassing, like demoralizing thing as a kid, because like, again, we didn't realize the implications of the language. We were just repeating what we heard on TV, you know. And like, so, you know, that was always just that always stuck with me in my mind. And like I will still quote movies to this day, and I love it when people can catch the reference, you know, when you're like you say something and somebody's like, oh, you know, and I'm like, oh yeah, you know what I'm talking about, you know. And so but you know, to kind of go further into that, like as far as my taste in movies developed, got real into Tarantino when I was like in, yeah, probably about in high school, you know, because like that was another one I was not allowed to watch, was Pulp Fiction. And I mean, for a good reason. That's
Mm.
not a movie that a kid should be watching, you know. I think I would only been like 12 at the time. But I ended up watching it again. I think this is one my dad rented. He was like, "Oh, you can watch Pulp Fiction." Meanwhile, some guys getting fucked in the ass and they're cutting people up with like samurai swords and shit. And so like
Yeah.
it was a little heavy, But I used to go, and I think he only had God, like 3 movies out at the time because like Jackie Brown had just come out, and
Hmm.
so I was like, "Oh, new Tarantino movie." He had like an indie movie that I've still never seen to this day, and then he had Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. But I would go and walk down the street with my neighbors and religiously rent Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. And then it was like, well, Jackie Brown came out and I rented that, and I wasn't really too into it at the time. I appreciate it more now that I'm
Yeah.
older. I think it's actually a good movie. I think it was probably one of his last like really good movies, in addition to like Kill Bill. But I used to go down there, and there was like all these like clones of like Tarantino movies. Like you had 2 Days in the Valley, like Killing Zoe, which was, I can't remember if it was written or directed by Roger Avery, who wrote Pulp Fiction, but like all Suicide Kings, that was another one. And so I would watch all these like kind of weird like
Yeah.
Tarantino clones and stuff like that. That was a big memory for me. And then I got into college, and I don't know that I watched much different when I was in college, but it wasn't until my grandmother was like in declining health that she bought this movie or this book for me called A Thousand and One Movies You Must See Before You Die. And it was really interesting because it was kind of my foray into like art house movies, because they would have like Kurosawa movies in there and like
Well, that's
Bergman and
awesome.
like, yeah. And
That's
so
very
like I
cool.
always I always made it my goal to watch as many movies in there as I could. I don't think that I finished it, but it really kind of opened my world up to, like the Criterion movies were like a huge one. And like I owned a Criterion copy of Chasing Amy in when I was actually in the Marines, actually. And because I big into the Kevin Smith movies, I got into like my dad showed us Clerks as a kid. That was another one, and I was like, this movie's kind of weird, but it's kind of awesome in a
Mm.
way. And then I watched Mallrats, and I was like, oh, this is part of a trilogy, Chasing Amy. I also remember being in Japan and loaning that to one of my Marine buddies, and like, the whole movie's about like basically like a bisexual tryst between Jason Lee, Ben Affleck, and Joey Lauren Adams. And like I lent it to him, and I was like, "Hey, what'd you think of it?" He's like, "No, I'm not really into it." I was like, "Oh, you didn't like it?" And like I didn't really like look at it for that. I just looked at it for like Kevin Smith was awesome director, and it was still in that like View Askew universe. Yeah,
Oh.
View Askew
Mhm.
universe or whatever. Like he didn't deviate from that until much later on. But back to what I was saying about Criterion, because Chasing Amy came out on Criterion. Uh, I got a subscription. I'm a charter member of the Criterion channel. They gave me this nice little like metal. I don't know what you would call it. It's like a not a placard, but just a little like kind of. It's like shaped like a business card, but
Okay.
got real into like, yeah, like I said, art house movies. Tarkovsky. Uh, like I said, Bergman, Kurosawa, just the typical like art house greats. And it's interesting because the first movie that I ever owned on, well, not that I ever owned, but that my parents ever owned on Betamax. Which, if you don't know what Betamax is, there were two different format. I mean, I know but like for the audience, there's two different formats that came out back in the day, and there was VHS, and then there was Betamax. And Betamax actually was the superior quality machine. My dad bought it based on a recommendation of some guy at like Sears or J.C. Penney's or something like that, one of those big box stores. I don't even know if those still exist anymore, but bought it, and he goes, man, what the reason that it failed out was because whenever porn started going to home video, VHS was the one that ultimately got more of the porn releases, and so Betamax eventually fizzled out. You could also compare that to
Wow.
when they did Blu-ray and HD DVD. HD DVD failed out because they weren't releasing a lot of porn on it. But I remember my dad very distinctly saying, he goes, I would have gone in and clocked that fucking salesman, like if I known that Betamax was going to do what it did." But they owned a copy of The Pope of Greenwich Village,
Oh,
which I
wow.
don't know if you've ever seen that. Yeah, Mickey Rourke and Eric Roberts, and quite honestly, probably Eric Roberts' best role. He fucking steals that show. He's great in that movie. And then Daryl Hannah's in it. And they were doing a double feature of it at the New Beverly. in Los Angeles, which to anyone who doesn't know, the New Beverly is owned by Quentin Tarantino. And they were doing a double feature of it with Donnie Brasco. Um, they Eric Roberts came and introed the movie, and I got to meet him for a second. Hey, how are you doing? Nice to meet you. Da da da. And I watched it. I'd never seen it before, but again, it's probably one of my favorite movies at this point. And my friends that were with me, they didn't stay for Donnie Brasco. They said, "Hey, we're going to cut out. We've seen this before." And also, Donnie Brasco, great movie too.
Love it.
So I stayed and watched it, and it was 1:30 in the morning. I was leaving um, the theater, and I got hit by a Suburban. And many of you know this. Like I lost a portion of my spine. I got hit in the ribs. Like I broke a bunch of my ribs. I had blood and fluid in my lungs, and I remember just thinking, uh, wow, I remember my parents owned this, and this could have conceivably been the first movie I ever watched, and also the last movie I ever watched.
Jesus
Not with
Christ.
sans Donnie Brasco. Yeah, I was like, wow, that's kind of a weird, like, a weird like glitch in the matrix type thing or whatever. And I remember being driven to Cedar Sinai Hospital, which is where Notorious B.I.G. went. Kind of cool. And I called my parents, and I told them, I was like, "Mom, Dad, I just got hit by a car." They're like, "We're getting on a plane right away, and we're coming to Los Angeles." Like, no, I'm fine. I'm not like in that bad a shape. I said, I think I'll be okay like that. And they were just like all worried and stuff. And I go, but the movie was good like that. And they started laughing, because it was just like a moment of levity and all that. So coincidentally, across the street was where Sharon Tate and family, family friends, had their last meal before they were murdered by the Manson family, the El Coyotes. So,
Jesus. Wow.
yeah, that's kind of my
Mhm.
relationship with film, like going to theater, going experiences, and I got to see. Do you remember Movie Pass?
Mhm.
I had Movie Pass, and being in a big city, it was fucking amazing because there's so many good theaters in LA. You've got like the Egyptian Theater, which has been around since like the 20s, the Vista, the Chinese, and I got to go see so many amazing movies. And you were talking about Marvel movies earlier. I'd never watched any of the Marvel movies, and then I think it was like Black Panther came out, and Thor Ragnarok, and Avengers Infinity War, and I was doing a different channel at the time, a movie channel, and so we wanted to review newer shit. And so it was like, well, I'm going to go watch these with Movie Pass, and like, but I would go see shit that I wouldn't even ordinarily go see in a theater. Like I watched Lady Bird, and I mean, that was a good movie, but it was like, it wouldn't have been my typical fare to go see. And like, I got to see, Tommy Wiseau did a film later on after The Room called Best Friends with Greg Sestero, and like Greg Sestero came on my podcast, and like I made friends with him, and like it was really just a really like enriching experience there. So that was my favorite thing about living in LA, was just going to all the different theaters.
Yeah, I mean that's cool because I mean it goes without saying that's where movies are from, I guess. You know what I mean? That's like,
Hmm.
when you go to movies there, like, I mean, it's just, you know, being there and just being, there's so many things, kind of back to what we were talking about earlier, is like so many of the movies that shaped who we are now were created there by people that were just clocking in and working. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It was just
Yep.
just their day, and then
Yep.
like now, so I mean, it's just it's pretty crazy. And my whole thing about movies too is I actually went through a long phase. I probably have to say, the later part of the '90s into early 2000s, where I just really didn't fuck with movies. I just didn't really. I was so into music
Hmm.
that, like, that it was just like, if there's a movie that was, music adjacent, or a lot of the things that I watched were like, the home videos that would come out on DVD or VHS, whatever. Like a band would put out like a thing with just all their shit on it, concert films, or documentaries. I was a big VH1 behind the music guy. I used to watch that all the fucking time.
Nice.
You know what I mean? And then like 9/10 of the stuff almost all the books that I owned, were biographies about bands, and
Yeah.
whatnot. And I got into philosophy. I got into like, like Bruce Lee and Nietzsche, and LaVey, and a lot of Hindu stuff. So my books were like, on one side it was like Motley Crue's The Dirt, you know, oops, sorry, uh,
Oh, you
some
good?
some some book that Gene Simmons wrote, and then like the Bhagavad Gita and Beyond Good and Evil. You know what I mean? So it's just kind of like,
Right.
so, but I mean, it was kind of all over the place. But like my whole thing was there was so many fucking movies that came out that like I wanted my friends that were total like movie freaks. I'm like, tell me what movies I need to watch. It's like my friend Terry Taylor, who actually owns this amazing store called 1313 Mockingbird Lane in Lawrence, Kansas. It is a horror movie store basically, but it's got like sci-fi and whatnot, whatever. But like he had a love for horror movies. And I remember very vividly, I was in a band with him for a short period of time, probably like around 2001, 2002. And he goes, all right, I'm going to give you a couple of movies that you need to know. And you need to know Donnie Darko. And
Mm.
he was really big into the movie Session 9, which I just got on VHS today, which is kind of funny. But
Saw
like,
that.
and it was a really interesting movie that was kind of like like he was the first guy that I ever knew that owned a DVD player. And
Mm.
I remember him telling me that it cost him like $600, and it was like a big one, and it was a huge one, and it wasn't like a multi-disc, it was just one disc, and it was like bigger
Right.
than a VCR. And you go into his house and he would have bookshelves, like when you walk in the house, DVDs, living room, DVDs everywhere, and then he had like another room, like his dining room, I want to say, had like VHS and then vinyl, and then there was more DVDs. You go upstairs. But his love of film kind of like, the third movie was Army of Darkness. Like, so he was kind of
Oh,
like,
great one.
yeah, he was like Army of Darkness, Session 9, and Donnie Darko. And so those movies, getting into that kind of like, I was like, okay, anything that's Donnie Darko adjacent, Session 9 ish, Army of Darkness ish, whatever, and so it's something that had those flavors to it. You know what I mean? And then, you
Yeah.
know, I only kind of let him and some other friends I had tell me what movies to watch, because it wasn't pre-internet. The internet existed at the time, but this was like the early to mid, probably the mid to late 90s. But it was just kind of like, I just wasn't really a movie guy because I was so afraid. I'm like, oh shit, I'm gonna waste time. And then one thing that kind of turned me off of movies was I had a friend of mine that was really into. The only way I can describe it was like he was psyched for the worst possible movies. Like I remember we would go to the theater and we were going to go watch something, and I'm like, oh, such and such is playing. It's a Tarantino movie, and he goes, oh, I want to watch this. This is a Steven Seagal. What was that Steven Seagal movie where he dies in the fucking first 10 minutes or 5 minutes, early in the movie?
Executive Decision.
Yeah, we went and fucking saw Executive Decision while there was something. Honestly, there was like a Tarantino movie or something going on or whatever,
Oh,
and and then he did get me
probably would
into.
have been Jackie Brown because I think
Yeah,
it's 97. Yeah.
that sounds about right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was around that time where him and I hung out a lot, and then we would go to the theater, and I would just be okay, cool. What should I see? And then after a while, I'm like, dude, this guy picks the worst fucking movies. And so I literally, from about like 1998 until about like maybe 4 years ago, I just wasn't a movie guy. I was like, whatever, you know what I mean? And it
Yeah.
was just like, I would buy like, if I had any DVDs, it'd be like if there was like an Adult Swim cartoon I loved. Oh, this is all,
Mhm.
every season of Aqua Teen Hunger Force,
Aqua Teen.
yeah,
Yeah.
every season
Squidbillies.
of Metalocalypse, Tim and
Yep.
Eric Awesome Show, Brack Show, stuff like that. And that was what I owned. And then my kids, I'm probably gonna get fucking DHS called on me, but I raised my kids on SpongeBob, Family Guy, and Simpsons.
It's
We
not too
had,
bad.
yeah, we had DVDs of those, and so it was just kind of, my kids, they would like, we'd be driving in the minivan and we'd have the fucking portable DVD player with the screen, and
Nice.
they'd be watching Family Guy, Family Guy and SpongeBob, and it was just like, so I mean, but that was what I owned for movies, and I would never go to a theater. In fact, my wife's hilarious. The last movie she saw in a theater was when we've been together since '98. And the last movie she saw in the theater was Blair Witch Project when it was in the theaters. That is
Holy shit.
yeah, no shit. The
That was
last movie,
25 years ago.
dude, yeah, that was the last movie she went and paid a ticket, sat down and watched in a fucking theater.
What?
Yeah, it's fucking crazy. And I mean, and then
Wow.
whenever my kids wanted to go to a movie or whatever, she was just like, she goes, I can't sit in a fucking theater. I can't do it. You know, so I'd take my kids to the movie, you know, and then we get together after the movie. But it was just crazy. So my wife being like my best friend and like, you know, the person I've been with for the past 25 years, so much of her, like her pastimes and her hobbies, you know, and like, you know, she was never in a band and she didn't, you know, she never tattooed and she didn't do a lot of things that I did or whatever, but like our couples kind of things, you know, it was, oh, if we watched a movie, it was at home, you know what I mean? Or whatever. It's just,
Right.
so we, you know, we'd go to concerts together and stuff like that. But like, you know, so there was just a big chunk, you know, where it was like, I was almost always watching, you know, television, you know, and like, you know, just binging seasons of stuff and, you know, but so I got kind of back into movies, you know, a few years ago. Like my aunt, who when we moved back to Iowa, she looked out for us, and we stayed with her for a little while before we found our house and stuff. And she's a big movie person, so you know, we talk about movies, and I'm just like, I started asking questions. And what's funny is, um, my okay, where I live right now, right outside of Sioux City, Iowa, and Stephen King's. Did Stephen King do Children of the Corn?
Yes.
Okay,
He didn't
Stephen
direct it, but he wrote it. Yeah.
yeah, Stephen King's Children of the Corn was filmed like 30 minutes from here.
No
Um,
shit.
yeah, Sioux City, Iowa. There were scenes that were filmed in Sioux City, Iowa, and in Ottawa, Iowa. And so every year since 1983 or whatever it is when it came out, all the kids that there was a group of kids from North High in Sioux City, and I want to say one of the other high schools in town, where they recruited a bunch of kids for extras in Children of the Corn. And so
No
all
way.
these kids that went to school that were involved in Children of the Corn when it was filmed here have like a yearly reunion. They have like a film fest and they play Children of the
No
Corn and
way.
shit. It's cool as fuck,
That's
dude.
cool.
Like, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
and I've got there's actual scenes in the movie where I can pinpoint where my cousins Mike, Ron, and Carol are in. There's a scene where they're in like the kind of like the it's not a ghost town, but the town where it's, you know, it all dies down, you know, because well, they're in the cafe. I don't know if you remember the cafe scene where they take the guy's hand and put him in the meat slicer. Put the guy's hand in the
Oh
meat.
yeah.
My cousin Ron is one of those kids doing it, you know. And then there's a scene where like the main couple, they're walking down the street or driving down the street, and see the two little girls running across the street, you know, like that. My cousin Carol was one of those two girls,
Oh
and
wow.
then my cousin Mike, I can't remember, he had a very prominent scene too, where he was like the group of kids standing like in the field, and he's the tallest one, you know. And then there's like he had a couple of different scenes in there. So that movie, like Children of the Corn and Stephen King horror and stuff like that, it's always kind of been sort of in my DNA, you know, because that, you know, I just recently got the Dead Zone on VHS. You know, that's a great
Oh,
fucking
that's a
movie.
good one.
You know, and
Yeah. John
then
Carpenter.
yeah. So, but I don't know. It's dude. Honestly, like your story with how you connect with film and everything like that. It's it's like it's plugged into into your DNA in so many ways. With me, it's kind of real sporadic, and I've always kind of just been like a, you know, just it's always been kind of like a pop culture kind of thing. You know, it's kind of like
Sure.
oh, I'm here. Let's go see a movie. Okay, you know, it wasn't really anything that I really sought out. It was like, okay, well, there's nothing else going on tonight. You want to go see a movie? All right, cool. And then I go see this movie that blows my mind and changes my life forever. You know what I mean? So it's never
Yeah,
really
yeah.
intention. Never really got, but I mean, I was always, you know, a big Schwarzenegger fan. You know, and like my mom worshipped Chuck Norris. That was like her guy. You know, and
Nice.
then it became Swayze after that. You know, and so like, and I would watch what my mom would watch. You know what I mean? So, but like I don't know, man. Like over the past, probably since about like last April, just out of the blue, I got into collecting VHS again. And like since April, I've got like about almost 450 fucking VHS tapes
Wow.
I've amassed since just randomly, dude. Because me and my wife, we would go to yard sales and garage sales and shit during the summer, and people, you know, selling like phenomenal shit for like a quarter. You know, but like, oh, it's VHS,
Wow.
it's garbage. Well, I'll see, like, you know, whatever. But so I
Someone's
just
trash is someone else's treasure, you
yeah,
know.
and so to kind of touch on something you said earlier, some of the more kind of formative movies, you know, my goal was like, I'm just going to collect all like the best movies from my childhood, like, and because I know guys that are big film collectors, and they collect like obscure horror, trauma
Mhm.
and stuff like that. That's great, but that shit's like 50 to 100 or $200 a pop, for like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Slumber Party Massacre on VHS is like $300. I'm like, I'm not that deep into it. I'm like,
No.
if I find like today, like I went to this random flea market, I got Gremlins, Ghostbusters, Karate Kid 1 and 2, Island of Dr. Moreau, and Session 9, like all at this flea market.
Nice.
And Karate Kid 1 and 2, Ghostbusters and Gremlins, no brainer. Those fucking movies, like game changers when you're a kid. Session 9 gave me fucking nightmares. Island of Dr. Moreau, probably one of the weirdest fucking movies that Val Kilmer and fucking
Marlon
Marlon
Brando.
Brando have ever fucking been in. You know what I mean? So it's just,
Yeah.
and then through collecting VHS, I spiraled off into different universes of like, oh shit, I need to get this. I get this one. I want to collect the whole, the whole thing. And then I find
Sure.
myself into the 90s, and then I'm like, okay, well, so and so made this film, so check this out. And then meanwhile, while I was worshiping this one film when I was a kid, the whole time there's this other shit going on, and I find movies that I didn't never knew existed that were going on at the same time. So it's fun. And
Yeah.
so, and then talking to you and like, I love, kind of like picking your brain for what you know about movies and stuff. And that's why I think it's going to be cool doing this show. I hate to be the wet blanket guy. I'm going to have to wrap it up here in a couple minutes, but I
Yeah.
wanted
Yeah.
I wanted to touch on. I'm excited for this because I think that by with us calling one of our first shows, why did you make me watch this? I think that like that question can be asked two different ways. One, it's like, you just put me through 90 minutes of sheer torture. What the fuck is wrong with you? Or, dude, what about this movie is so important to you, and why is it so essential that I see it? And
Mhm.
that's kind of what I want to learn, because another thing too, a side note, one of the reasons why I started collecting VHS is because I love vinyl. I have almost 1,000 records. I'm super into collecting physical media, but like the way that people are gouging prices for used vinyl nowadays and new vinyl, I had to step back and just be like, I was buying like 2 or 3 records, every other week when I get paid, whatever, to try to keep up on stuff like that. But like now I'm just like, dude, I can go on Mercari, eBay, Amazon, whatever, and fill my cart with like 5 or 6 movies for like around $7, and
That's
just have
incredible.
hours of fucking, hours of fun, and then just, so it's kind of like, instead of spending 25 to $30 a pop for something that like is going to be a good record, don't get me wrong, but like on one record when I can get like 6 or 7 classic movies,
Yeah.
for the same price. So just basically out of necessity, and because of, this recession or whatever the fuck we're in, that hopefully is going to be done soon. But it's cool. It put me in a whole new mindset to where like now I'm interested in film, and it's cool because I don't know shit. I don't know much. I know what I like, and I know things about the movies that I like, but like I'm more of kind of like a trash eater. I'm like, I'm going to Olive Garden while you're going to, you go to a nice Italian bistro because chef, his specialty, and you know why it's good, and you know why that restaurant has the best fucking manicotti, in that state, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
dude, this is that one guy that did that thing with so and so. I'm gonna check that out, because there's a scene where there's boobs and the guy's head blows up, and so I'll check that
Yeah.
shit out.
Well, and like, and I'll wrap it up here, but one of the things I wanted to say real quick is, hey, sometimes you like filet mignon, but sometimes you got to have a McDonald's, and I can totally
Exactly.
relate to all that, and like, so, when you're talking about like periods where you didn't watch movies, there's only been 2 periods in my life. Well, 3 periods kind of where one where I wanted to watch movies but wasn't able to. That was when I was stationed in Japan, and we didn't have television, we didn't have nothing, so people would have to send us movies over there, and I got to watch the original Nightmare on Elm Street movies. That was one I definitely wasn't allowed to watch when I was a kid. Those were forbidden
Heavy.
for me. But my sister even she watched one with a neighbor one time. She's like, those movies scared the shit out of me. And I was like, yeah, I mean, they're pretty traumatizing for a kid. But when I was in Japan, when I was a monk, and that was voluntarily, I didn't watch movies, just because I was trying to like stay focused on spirituality and being a monk and stuff like that. I remember I was home, and I'm big into the Alien series, and Prometheus was playing at the theater, and I was gonna go to watch it. I was like, yeah, maybe I'll go. The roof at the mall where it was at fucking caved in and collapsed, and like I don't know if it killed anybody or hurt anybody, but I took that as an indicator. I was like, well, maybe I shouldn't be going to movies. But like, I watched very few movies in my 2 year tenure as a monk. One of the movies I remember distinctly watching was Drive. And I was a brahmachari at the time, and I took the other brahmacharis in the temple, and I was like, "Hey, you guys want to go watch a movie?" And they were like, "Yeah, let's go watch a movie." And so we all watched Drive, and then it's like you get to the scene where he's like smashing the fuck out of his hand with the fucking hammer, and there's like girls in there, titties out, and everything. And I was like, I shouldn't have been showing these guys this. I don't
Is
know,
that the
but
Mark Dacascos? Is that the movie? Dro-
no, it's Ryan Gosling.
okay,
Have you
okay,
not
I
seen
know
it?
which one. What's it?
Okay,
Dude? The guy I mentioned earlier that basically turned me on to the highest level of garbage. He got really big into Cynthia Rothrock and Mark Dacascos and like all these fucking
nice.
B movie, which I totally appreciate now. But all
Yeah.
these, I was in my big Tarantino, Scorsese fucking thing, basic bitch fucking like film guy shit in the late
Sure.
'90s, and he was into this fucking just this slap together sub Jason Statham bullshit, which I
Yep.
fucking love actually nowadays.
Yeah, it's fun.
But it was, but there was a movie called Drive that was Mark Dacascos, which was he was like his claim to fame was he was like this world champion like taekwondo guy, and they were trying to
Yeah.
get him, and and it was called Drive, and I thought it was the other fucking movie, and it was this whole deal where he had to like it was almost the same premise as Crank, where he had to constantly do shit to stay alive or whatever the fuck,
That's
or
a
he was
great
like
movie.
yeah. So, but anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just like when you said
No,
Ron,
no, no.
I'm like, was it the fucking Dacascos one or the Gosling?
No, and Cynthia Rothrock, I started kind of getting into her movies because I watch a lot of bad movie channels and stuff.
Yeah,
But what I was gonna say was, in which I shouldn't say Cynthia Rothrock is bad because she was actually a badass. She was actually really good at what she did, but she just never kind of hit like as far as like her male contemporaries at the time. But the one I was talking about 3 times in my life where I haven't been watching a lot of movies. The third time is actually now, believe it or not. Like I have been so busy like creating, and what I typically watch is like YouTube, and what I watch sometimes I'll just throw on a movie in the background. Like Star Trek 2 and 3 have been in constant rotation just because I'll throw them on in the background just to have something on, and then I'll be doing something else just because I don't have to pay attention to the movies. I know how
right.
they've played. I've seen them hundreds of fucking times,
Mhm.
But yeah, I've actually been trying to kind of like up my movie game again. There was a period in time where I was watching a film a day or sometimes 2 films a day, and like, especially like living in LA, like you want to be really familiar with the language of film
Yeah,
when you're out there. It definitely goes a long way when you're dealing with like industry types like Millie Bobby Brown from Stranger Things. She was talking with Winona Ryder, and Winona Ryder, she's a bevy of just like film knowledge, and like Jenna Ortega, who I think is a fantastic actress. I was really impressed when I saw her in Scream. I was like, this kid's gonna go places. But she's really dialed into the language of film too. And Winona Ryder actually respected that and kind of. She didn't call her out by name, but she kind of threw shade at Millie Bobby Brown. She's like, "What if you're in an industry where you are, involved in film? Like you should know about films that came before you, and much like with our hardcore journey, like we were talking about this earlier, like you should definitely have like a basic understanding of like what came before you. And like
yeah,
sometimes you'll find shit that's really good. Like I've watched so many movies, and I have a movie guru. His name is he's you might know him actually, but I haven't spoken to him in a while. But Cutler Dejaler Desjardins. He would always be. He's like, man, you got to watch this. You'll love it. You'll love it. Just obscure shit, like I said, out of the way type shit. And like,
mm,
so that, like I said, I'm really happy to start this channel because I think that it's going to be kind of a good opportunity for us both, and we'll kind of get to like analyze films and kind of like weigh them out for what they are, and you know. one thing I wanted to say before we go is that, yeah, we're going to be definitely doing a lot of series. We're going to be doing, like I said, why did you make me watch this? We're going to probably spin off a few series. We've got a few irons in the fire as far as like what we want to create. So, be on the lookout for that, and, like and subscribe to the channel, click on the bell for notifications. You got anything else there, JC?
No, I just said I'm real excited to be doing this, and kind of like I like having an excuse to watch movies.
Me
I
too.
mean I would get so many movies at once, and at first I was like, I'm just going to go in alphabetical order and start, with 48 Hours, and then go into Army of Darkness, Aliens, or whatever, and then I would bring more stacks home, and I'm like, fuck, what am I gonna, So I need to have excuses and reasons to watch certain movies, and giving assignments, and it's just like it's fun. I mean, it's a good way to stimulate your brain, and it's kind of like to talk about other stuff, because I mean I've been doing music for a long time, and
Yeah.
it's kind of nice to talk about something else, and
Yes.
I hope people get the same thing out of it that we get out of it, and just kind of like when somebody turns you on to something that you wouldn't normally get into, that's always kind of fun. So I hope that we can get you guys into some cool stuff too, or some
Yeah,
terrible shit.
absolutely. Yeah, some horrible
Hopefully
shit.
yeah. You can hate us for a lot of reasons. But I want the only one to be that we made you
Because we
watch
have
it.
bad taste. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
Real quick before we go though, last movie you saw in theaters.
Last movie I saw in theaters. Why is this one a hard one for me? Dude. Oh, okay. It's right on the tip of my tongue. I did go. Oh shit.
I'll tell you what I saw. I saw Alien Romulus, and first half of the movie really liked. Second part, not so much. There's a point in the middle. If you haven't seen it already, you'll know what I'm talking about. Jumps the shark. Totally took me out of the fucking movie. But what can you do?
It was okay. It was a Marvel movie, and I think it was the most current Captain America one. The or
Oh, that
the
would have been years ago, I think.
what? Okay, what's a Marvel movie that came out uh in 2021? Not not
Um,
not Shang-Chi. Um, oh
fuck,
my
I don't
fuck,
know.
dude.
Yeah.
Okay, here's the thing. The movie I went to go see was so fucking bad I don't even remember it. I'm not even gonna lie. The
Whoa.
last movie the last movie I do remember going right before COVID kicked off. Me and my son went and saw a Dragon Ball Z movie in a theater in Jacksonville, North Carolina, and
Oh wow.
really fucking nice theater. And I don't remember the name of that one, but that shows you how out of the loop I am with just going to see film. My fucking son Lucas will go. There'll be movies we want to go see, and he'll come home and be like, "Oh, was you? Oh, I went and saw blah blah blah." I'm like, "You fucking asshole! I wanted to go see that. You couldn't wait for me." He went and saw Beetlejuice without me. He went. Just like so many good movies that have come out over the past couple of years. But yeah, dude. So anyway, hope everybody
Well,
digs this. And
yeah. Well, like I said, more to come. Like I said, like, subscribe, click on that little bell for notifications, and well, like LeVar Burton and Reading Rainbow says, we'll see you next time.